My friend and colleague, Representative Andy Biggs, to talk about H.R. 3004, Kate's Law, and the importance of securing our nation from violent, illegal felons. And I yield him as much time as he may consume.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my friend from Colorado, Mr. Buck, for yielding. I'm grateful for his leadership as a conservative, and also it's been my honor to serve with him this past year, and I appreciate him sharing some time with me tonight as I share several important stories. These are stories of people, real people, not just some people who are distant to us. These are people that we know, people just like this. Mr. Speaker, one early January morning in 2015, a young man named Grant Ronnebeck began the graveyard shift at a Quick Trip convenience store in my district. After his parents' divorce, Grant took the initiative to find a job working at this convenience store in Mesa, Arizona, to help his family pay the bills. He was only 21 years old. He had his entire life ahead of him. Just before 4 a.m., an angry customer walked in, demanded a pack of cigarettes, and dumped a handful of change on the store counter. Grant started to count the money, but he saw the customer pull a gun out and point it directly at his head. Grant tried to immediately hand over the cigarettes in a desperate attempt to save his life, but it was too late. The customer shot Grant in the face in cold blood, took the cigarettes, and casually walked out of the store. Grant, his father describes him as being his buddy from the minute he was born and a person that brightened everybody. He did not leave the store alive that night. The customer's name was Apolinar Altamirano. He was an illegal alien with a long criminal record, including of violent crimes. He was held in federal custody but then released while he awaited deportation proceedings. Our government let Grant down when they allowed Grant's killer to walk out of custody and onto our streets. Altamirano should have remained in custody until he was departed. But he was set free, and Grant was killed due to the government's failure to hold this violent criminal in custody until deported. Sadly, Grant's story is not unique. Many Americans are aware of another tragic incident, the case of Kate Steinle. Kate was 32 years old. She was walking along a San Francisco pier when an illegal alien shot and killed her. This illegal alien had just been released from prison again. He should have been held until deportation, but he in fact had been deported many times previously. And even then, he was set free only to kill Kate Steinle. In 2014, Mesa, Arizona police officer Brandon Mendoza was killed in a wrong-way crash by an illegal alien who was driving under the influence of drugs and alcohol. And in January 2016, Sarah Root was murdered by an illegal alien who was drunk and drag racing in Omaha, Nebraska. In each of these cases, Grant and Brandon, I am privileged to know their parents, Steve Ronnebeck and Marianne Mendoza. These victims are fierce advocates who tirelessly work to make sure these types of tragedies never happen to another family, and I am grateful for their efforts. And I believe that we are making significant headway to stop these type of catch and release programs that allow criminals to remain on our streets. In June of this year, the House of Representatives passed H.R. 3003, the No Sanctuary for Criminals Act, and H.R. 3004, Kate's Law. Tandemly, these bills would end the policies that contributed to the tragic deaths of Grant, Kate, Brandon, and Sarah. I was pleased to co-author the first bill, which included my legislation, Grant's Law. Grant's Law is named in memory of Grant Ronnebeck. All Americans can agree that someone who is criminally violent should not be released back onto the streets. Yet for years, the Obama administration's policies failed to protect Americans by allowing criminally violent, illegal aliens to roam our streets and neighborhoods. These types of tragedies are preventable when the federal government enacts and enforces the No Sanctuary for Criminals Act and Kate's Law. Congress has begun to take meaningful action to bring these tragedies to an end, starting with the 2 bills we passed in June. Chairman Bob Goodlatte showed leadership and commitment to ensure these important bills receive consideration. These 2 bills, if enacted and enforced, would protect innocent Americans to prevent future tragedies like those of Grant, Kate, Brandon, and Sarah. When the bills passed out of the House, I hoped these bills would receive a swift vote in the Senate. That has not happened. I am still hoping for this vote to take place. I call upon the leadership of the Senate to put these bills up for a floor vote. We owe it to our constituents to put arcane tradition aside and to pass policies that will protect them. And yet, even in a Republican-controlled Senate, we cannot receive an up or down vote on these important immigration enforcement bills. Why is this? Mr. Speaker, I firmly believe the answer lies in the fatally flawed 60-vote rule. It is more commonly known as the filibuster, but the Senate's tradition is preventing consideration of nearly all legislation passed from the House. For example, look at our current situation. Since January, the House has passed over 300 bills, including the 2 immigration enforcement bills I have just discussed. These bills will most likely languish until the end of the term, in large part due to the filibuster rule. So what can be done about this irresponsible inaction? Well, the Senate can change the rule. Indeed, the Senate must change the rule. Many people do not realize that the 60-vote requirement is not even in the United States Constitution. It dates back to 1917, when the Senate agreed that debate could be cut off with a 2/3 majority vote. Decades later, when deciding a 2/3 vote was found to be too difficult to achieve, the Senate reduced the number of required votes to 3/5, or 60 of the current 100 senators. The filibuster is a tradition, barely a century old, less than half the age of the U.S. Constitution. There is a place for rules and traditions, but not when they obstruct the will of the American people. Is it honorable for the United States Senate to have a gentleman's agreement to keep bills from being voted on or to dilute our representation in the United States Senate? Americans would rather that Congress pass just and reasonable laws than to preserve extra-constitutional, institutionalized tradition. Americans want our border secure and our immigration laws to be enforced. Congress is running out of time to keep its promises to the American people. We promised to ensure that what happened to Kate and Grant, Brandon and Sarah would not happen again. The House has done its duty. It is time for the Senate to do its duty. There are no excuses to allow these bills to die in the Senate. I encourage my friends in the Senate to eliminate the 60-vote rule and to consider the 2 immigration enforcement bills the House passed in June. We must not allow inaction to be the enemy of our sworn responsibilities as representatives of the American people. Again, I thank my friend from Colorado. I appreciate the opportunity to say what's been on my mind.